Well, I'm here with Reverend Bob Hazen in his home. Brother Hazen has been a part of the Canadian Church of God ministry since 1977. Before that, he served stateside for 35 years as a pastor. He came to Western Canada as president. It was called to be the president of Gardner Bible College. The reason I'm talking with Prez, as we affectionately call him in the district, is that he has some significant history with the Church of God globally and particularly in North America. So, Bob Hazen, could you just begin and share with us what it was like to go to school at our college at that time, which was called Anderson Bible College and Seminary? What was it like in those days?
Yeah, it was called Anderson College and Theological Seminary.
Theological Seminary?
Well, I went as a boy from a very small farm in Ohio, and right out of high school, so I was walking on holy ground and yet new ground for me at that particular time. And it was the preface to the Second World War. And at that time, Warner Press was publishing had been the Gospel Trumpet and was now Vital Christianity at that time.
Right.
And Harold Phillips was the editor at that particular time. But I had the privilege of my paths having crossed with E. Byram, who had preceded him. No, excuse me, F.G. Smith, who had preceded him, and E. Byram, who had preceded F.G. Smith. And my paths had crossed with E. Byram as a young guy, and even as a young pastor, because I was only 19 when I went back to Ohio to pastor during the war. And so I had the privilege of knowing personally D.S. Warner's son, and F.G. Smith's wife was a personal friend of mine. F.G. Smith, at that particular time, being editor of the Gospel Trumpet Company and the writer, I don't think folks today are not aware of the degree to which F.G. Smith was the leader of the Church of God. He had published 2 books, What the Bible Teaches and Revelation Explained.
Right.
And he was also editor of the Gospel Trumpet magazine and Gospel Trumpet Company. And so he wielded an enormous amount of influence. But he was so extremely pro-Reformation Church of God that he was anti-education. I don't think that was a proper title, but he was threatened by the college and higher education and higher criticism of the scriptures. And so there was no question of what there was, that polarization. Here's the college, here's F.G. Smith, and here's the Gospel Trumpet Company. And the history preceding that, of course, was that the Gospel Trumpet Company had built the building that housed Anderson College, which was the home for the volunteer laborers who kept Warner Press going. So that across the road experience, relationship was there, but it developed to the point where F.G. used the Gospel Trumpet at times, and particularly in his writing and lecturing and so on, being anti-education because he saw it becoming liberal, becoming anti-Reformation movement, and as a result of that attack, our Byram, who had written the first theology book, systematic theology for the Church of God, became so attacked by that following that F.G. Smith had, that he just threw up his hands and quit. And went on into business then. And so we lost, at that point, one of our best minds. He kept it up until A.F. Gray and, no, here's a name I can't pull out, left the college and was involved in Warner Pacific College. And it was primarily far enough away that they were free to develop their own theology, their own points, and so on. So that the polarization almost exists to this day.
Yeah, yeah.
You could almost say north and south, as the Baptist movement as the northern and southern. I look back on it and I think, I wish we had just simply said, well, we here in the north, this is what we believe, this is what we're going to hold to, and if you southerners don't want to go with us, that's your trouble. I wish we had done that.
Yeah.
It would have saved us, well, it would have saved the movement. We would have saved the movement.
While you were pastoring in the States, you had the opportunity of attending the General Assemblies in the 50s and the 60s. What were some of I was going to say, use the word issues or challenges, perhaps, that the movement faced in those early days?
One of them was the liberalism and stand of the college and the attack against them.
Yeah.
Even as late as in the early 70s. When I remember being in one of the assembly meetings when the attack was against Bob Reardon. And I remember going to lunch with my wife Dorothy at that time and sitting in the Chinese restaurant at the south end of Anderson and literally weeping, which is not one of my characteristics, and saying to Dorothy, this is not my church. I just can't comprehend what has happened because the attack was so vicious
against the school,
Bob Reardon and the college.
And the college.
And that,
wow.
And that was in the 70s.
So there was a concern about the church being too liberal, too educated. What else? What other kinds of challenges do you remember?
You're now asking about the challenge, what might have been in front of the assembly. I don't know as it ever came to the floor. My memory in those details is kind of skimpy. But the racial issue was very, very strong during all of that time.
Yeah.
And there's one aspect of the movement that I've never heard anybody use, but to me it was apparent that there was a strong pull or motivation that the Church of God become middle class. The need to become accepted as middle class was so extremely strong. And the middle class was anti-black, and so we would be anti-black. That's one of those factors. And of course, there was always the where's the money going?
Yeah.
And I had the privilege of chairing the World Service Division for a number of years, and the World Service Division was the heads of all of the departments who met to determine who was going to get what share of the World Service funds that were raised, which would be the president of the college and the leadership of the Board Church Extension and Home Missions, the Missionary Board, the Board of Christian Education, the Women's Missionary Society, and they were there. So here I am sitting at that table chairing with all of these executives around it. So I had a chance to study them and their personalities and the dynamics that went on nationally with these folks. So perhaps, unfortunately, I found some of them with feet of clay. But one of the things that I've never heard affirmed is that during those years, the church produced, which I've labeled statesmen, church statesmen. Now these were guys, some of them were ahead of these departments, but some of them were just good pastors who had a lot of common sense, who were accepted by the Anderson leadership, and who had, whenever they spoke, they listened. And so whenever there was something to be cautious about, or whenever there was an area of lack of vision or whatever, here they were with just that affirmation. And it's too bad I didn't keep a record of who they were and name them now, which I at one time could have, because I knew many of them personally. Many of them come not from the big churches, but from the respected, larger influence churches. There were influence churches, and then there were the big churches. And the big churches are not necessarily the influence pastors when it came to the movement itself. And along with that, we were also, there was also responding from the milieu of the Church of God and its churches and people, very gifted and sometimes brilliant people, which I don't find it being labeled that now. But for instance, and I can't think of her name, the gal who felt called to be a missionary, and she went to Jamaica all alone. She goes down there with some support to do what she can to promote the kingdom and the Church of God in Jamaica. Well, bless her heart. You know, some years ago, 125 churches, an ongoing Bible school, a high school that is still going on there, and all because of this one lady who goes and with a foot in the door began to teach and preach, and I think many other missions causes we got footholds by personalities like that across the movement, and so
who were willing to take a risk,
and by faith, and feeling this is where I'm being led,
and this is where I'm being led and called to. Yeah, you're right. I think we did have a number of those leaders in those early days that were like that. Yeah,
and also the visionary aspect of the leaders of Anderson and from the milieu of Outer Edge was the visionary for expanding the kingdom and the gospel and the Church of God movement, like the Christian Brotherhood Hour. You see, it was primarily the baby of the Board Church Extension and Home Mission, and it kind of then eventually went on its own from under that canopy. But the Christian Brotherhood Hour worldwide, Church of God, had its own prestige and quality and so on. Well, now where at the close of broadcasting nationally and TV programming, there's a gap. Nobody took the lead. Nobody said, this is our vision. Nobody said, hey, let's do it, let's go. And as a result, what happened? Well, we just did not have, or do not have, a TV program, which could now be, as well as all the other named programs, or the Church of God program, should and could have been there.